Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So nice to see you both here. I'm so excited to be a part of this event and also this community. I really appreciate both of you and the Zen Zones, and it's really helped me so much in this complex but wonderful and exciting new world. Yay! At this point, should I just share my screen and like jump into the presentation? Okay. All right.
Take it away.
All righty. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Alrighty, so I am really excited to be presenting at this time, and basically my presentation is about brand colors and how do you choose your brand colors, and it's a soulpreneur's guide to brand colors. And this is one of the most exciting parts of the work that I do, because color is something that is we all experience it, and we all experience it in different ways, and it really impacts us, and it impacts how we feel. It impacts how we feel about ourselves depending on what we're wearing, and it also impacts how consumers will see us and what that means in terms of the kinds of colors we want to put out there for them. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Renee. I was a creative director in advertising many moons ago, and now I'm a business, brand, and life coach for soulpreneurs and soul-driven leaders. And basically, I've studied neurolinguistic programming because I really believe in the mind-body connection, and it's a big part of my coaching. And I also believe that we're citizens of the earth and citizens of the universe, so I'm an astrologer. And I really believe in astrology to understand our soul's map here in this life, and also our mission, because as course creators and as entrepreneurs, understanding our mission and getting more aligned with that can only help us become and step into who we're becoming. I'm also a meditation teacher on Insight Timer. My new Zenler website that I'm really excited about is soulandbrand.com. And I also have a soulpreneur community. So today we're going to talk about being a soulpreneur. We're going to talk about branding versus marketing. And we're also going to talk about choosing brand colors. So a soulpreneur is a soul-driven entrepreneur. So many of you that are listening right now may in fact be a soulpreneur. And a soulpreneur is basically someone who's passionate about living a life with purpose. And so your business, your courses, your coaching packages all have purpose. And it's about growing your business in alignment with your values and understanding what your values are. And it's about inspiring others in meaningful ways. And that there's something driving you to make a positive impact in the world. My transitions are really slow, so it's helping me slow down. And the one thing to remember is that purpose is everything. And brands that authentically lead with purpose are changing the nature of business today. And that's just something to think about. Thinking about what your purpose is, thinking about maybe some of those brands that you align with and why you align with them, and the purpose that they have that you align with. And from research, about 77% of consumers have stronger emotional bonds to purpose-driven brands. And an authentic brand, having an authentic brand is really important, because an authentic brand distinguishes you from others, and it helps people remember who you are, especially in a field of hundreds, thousands, millions, billions of people all around the world may be doing similar things to what you're doing. It's important to provide people with what they need to be able to remember who you are. And your brand, or having an authentic brand, also builds trust. And that's also a key point to growing your business. So branding is personal. And authenticity, being true to who you are and expressing your essence, is a big part of what branding is. And understanding your brand and how it's being communicated, because your brand is being communicated through your voice, your courses, what you write, how you write it, how you express yourself in social media, but it's also your look and feel. And your look and feel is your logo, or the way that the logo type that you use for your name that creates a level of recognizability. It's the imagery, the kind of graphics, photography that you use, the style in which you use it, and it's also your colors. And so what is branding? Branding actually dates back to over 4,000 years ago, and it's an old Norse word, brander, which means to burn or brand livestock. And in those days, when they had fields and fields of many, many cows, and they needed to distinguish whose cow it was, that's what they did. And so now when we refer to branding, there are basically three kinds of brandings. There's a company brand, which many of us are familiar with, the corporate brands. There's a product brand, certain brands, that come out from a larger company that establish themselves as a brand. And then there's the personal brand. And many of us here that are course creators or coaches, the personal brand is really essential because it's who we are and how we put ourselves out there to help others understand not just our services, but what we have to give, what we want to share, and the way we want to share it. So a brand has a vibe or an energy, and it's the first thing people see and even feel when they experience you, or even before they experience you, because of your marketing that goes out there with your branding. And your brand creates an emotional connection, and it attracts customers and collaborators. It attracts your clientele, it attracts your customers, and it attracts potential partners that you align yourself with, or that may be aligned with your values. And your brand has a personality, and it leaves an impression. And so branding is a strategic and also transformative experience, the process of branding, because you have to ask yourself some really deep questions around what makes you unique and how do you express your uniqueness. Because your brand is about communicating your authenticity and what is real within you, and how you want to share your services with others. And it defines your audience, because what your brand is, how your brand looks, how your brand communicates, who you are, helps define who's drawn to you and why. And so just to distinguish that branding is not marketing. Branding is what differentiates you from others. It's like the seed kernel of who you are. It's the mission, it's the vision, it's your values, and it's your look and feel. While marketing is how you grow your brand. It's about communicating your brand across the different channels, which are your email campaigns, your list builders, your social media strategy, advertising, SEO, all those things that would start drawing people to your brand. And according to Steve Forbes, editor-in-chief of Forbes Business Magazine, your brand is the single most important investment you can make in your business. And many of us that are solopreneurs, that are solo entrepreneurs, we may not have a lot of money to hire an agency to invest in our brand. So we're doing it on our own. We're feeling our way through it as we're building our platforms. So taking the time to understand what that means for you is really a big part of you establishing your brand as you're building your platform. And just to distinguish again, the difference between branding and marketing is branding would include your name, what your name is, the meaning behind your name. It may be your name, or it may be the name of a company that you're aligning with that becomes your business. It's your logo, your tagline, your fonts, your color, your brand personality, the strategy that goes behind it all, because your brand has a promise. Your brand stands for something. It starts to have a certain reputation out there in the channels that it's expressing itself in. And your marketing are the campaigns, the advertising, the emails, the list builders, the lead magnets, the promotions, and how that gets communicated on Instagram, TikTok, with Google through your SEO. And so I'd love for you to consider that your brand is really the soul of your business. And it all starts with your intention. So taking a moment to understand, what is your intention for your business, for your online business, because it all comes from there. And that there's something about your intention that's not something that's out here. It's really something that's inside. It comes from something deeply meaningful inside your body, deeply meaningful inside your heart. And when you connect with your brand intention and what you want to say and how you want to say it, everything comes from there. Everything flowers from there. Your purpose, your value, your vision, your logo, your visuals, your social media. It's the seed kernel that helps the flower of your growth bloom. And something to consider is that everything in this world is energy, is some form of energy. And even your brand is energy, and your brand has a personality. And that personality invokes feelings. And your brand could create a certain sense of relatability. It's important for your brand to be likable, to be trustworthy, and to have integrity. Just some things to consider about what you're putting out there and how you're putting it out there for others to respond to. And so when we see a brand personality, here are two personalities that are very different, but they both do similar things, but in very different ways. And you can sense just by looking at their photographs that they're very different, because you know their personalities. So even when you see their logo and what their logo stands for on the corporate business model that's based on who they are now, all the things that they create, all the things that are out there in the world, you get a sense of who they are just by looking at their logo, just by identifying their name and the way that their name has been depicted. Makes a big difference in terms of how it expresses who they are. And then when you consider larger corporate brands, and that you can identify the company just by looking at the logo, but also looking at the colors in terms of its recognizable qualities, what makes you remember that when you see them in a field of other competitors, and also how that brand makes you feel. There's a visceral feeling that you may have for these brands when you see their logo, when you see their colors, because they kind of stand for something. And so just to take a moment and to look at different logos and understand, maybe, how are you feeling about these brands as you look at their logo and as you look at their colors? What's being communicated to you, aside from the fact that you can recognize them, many of them even without their name? And so in regards to color, your color palette is one of the most noticeable elements of your brand. And from research, color can increase brand recognition by up to 80%. So identifying your brand with a specific color palette is a really wonderful way to help people remember who you are and what you stand for. But choosing colors aren't easy because there's a whole spectrum of colors out there. And sometimes it's hard to know where to go and what to choose. And so something to remember about color is that color has information, and color stimulates the senses, and color reflects mood, and color empowers us. When we wear something colorful or when we see something colorful, it could really impact how we feel about ourselves. And color boosts mood and energy. Color enhances creativity. It promotes positive emotions inside the body. And it expresses identity and values. And so something else to understand about color is that color has a spectrum. And within that spectrum, color is all about frequency. It's vibration and it's frequency. And on the spectrum, there are the lower spectrum of the slower waves, which is red, and then the higher spectrum, which is more like the purples and the violets, that vibrate at a higher or quicker frequency. And one of the reasons why red is a color that, emergency hospital paramedics, stop signs may use, because it's a lower, slower frequency. So somehow it impacts us and impacts our psyche. We remember it really, really quickly. But that's not to say that red should be the color that everybody uses, because each color means something very, very different, and color has meaning. And one of the interesting things about color and frequency is that somehow it also relates to the chakra system. So for those of you that are aware of the chakra system, those of you that are not aware of it, it's basically energy portals in the body that run along the spine. And they're not colors outside of you. It's actually a color range within you that denote base feelings at your root chakra that go all the way up to, let's say, how you grow in your heart center, and then maybe the higher levels of how you connect with others, some of the higher frequencies of positive mindfulness or having a positive mindset, and how you connect with others in a more positive way. So there's a psychology behind color. And the interesting thing about color psychology is that it's been going on for a very, very long time. And there's not one specific way to look at color, because from different points of view around the world and different cultures will look at color very differently. Different individuals will feel color very differently. All of our constitutions, our personalities are very, very different. But there are certain correspondences and there are certain things that are agreed upon, if you will, in terms of colors and how colors will make us feel. And so something to consider is the brain and how the brain works. So on the left-hand side of the brain, we've got the thinking part of the mind, so it's about details and logic and rational thinking, and we measure and we analyze. And that's about like the strategy of what we do and how we do it. It's the thinking process, it's the logic, it's the reasoning that requires us to, plan and strategize. And then the right part of the brain, or the right part of the mind, which is more expressive and emotional and feeling and sensing and imaginative. And colors fall into that realm of how do they feel in our bodies? How do color feel in our bodies? And it kind of opens up maybe a certain intuitive or instinctual window when we start to immerse ourselves with color or connect ourselves to color. And so something to ask yourself is, How do you want them to feel? And the them is your audience, your target audience. And understanding who they are is a big part of the equation. And understanding what their needs are is a big part of the equation. And understanding how you help them is a big part of the equation, right? So you use maybe your more logical mind to kind of understand who is your audience? Who are those people that are drawn to you? And how do you help them? What do they need and how do you help them? And then also, how do you want to feel, right? What colors will represent you and your brand? And what colors will motivate you, inspire you, and help you grow? And there's not one answer for everyone. There are different answers for all of us because we're all so unique. And so something to consider is the emotional impact of color on the body and how color feels in your body and what feels empowering when you look at certain colors. And what do you want to share with others? What do you want others to remember about you and your brand and the work that you do and what your courses are about and what your brand promise might be? And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through different colors. And as we move through the different colors, I'd like you to just take note. I'm going to do it in silence. And I'd like you to just take note of how the colors feel in your body. And this is a color brown in case monitors, in case you're not sure. And this is the color black because black is a color as well. And gray is a color as well. And white is a color as well. And so from that exercise, understanding what colors you lean into or what colors helped you feel a certain way and what colors stand for who you are and what your brand is. So as you look at the meanings now connected to the colors that you just saw, take note at the meaning behind the colors and what the colors felt like inside your body, right? So noticing and noting the impact that those colors have, what feels inspiring to you, and what may be motivating for your audience, what helps communicate what your brand does for others, and what you want to align with, what you want people to feel like when they come to your website, when they come to your course, when they interact with your brand. Maybe notice which ones speak the loudest to you. And sometimes when I work with clients, sometimes the words speak louder than the actual color. So maybe take note of what words speak really loudly to you and what colors speak really loudly to you, because there's not one rule to this process. It's a very right brain activity. It's a very intuitive, sensing, feeling activity. And then with those colors that you just saw, to keep in mind that those are pure tones, like the pure hues of color. And that inside of each of those colors, there's a spectrum of colors, different ways that those colors can communicate, right? So you've got the pure tones, the brighter colors that have more pop, that have more ring to them. And then you also have the lighter colors up at the top, which have a softer connotation to them, a softer kind of energy. And then you've got the deeper, darker versions of those colors that may carry a little more depth, maybe a little more weight to them. So again, take note. Which colors are speaking the loudest to you? And then just a little bit of understanding when you're choosing your palette and you're selecting your colors, that to be able to achieve the different range of colors, you're actually working different qualities inside of your slider, right? There's the hue, and that's going to bring you the actual color, whether you want to lean into red or you want to lean into orange, or maybe your brand color is blue. And then there's the value, the lightness or darkness of that color. Is it a deep blue? Is it a light blue? Is it a bright red? Is it a softer pink? And then there's also the saturation. And the saturation has to do with the brightness or whether it's muted, it's a more muted tone, or whether it's a more pure tone. And so just as an example, in terms of color and meaning, you can look at a darker blue, and that darker blue may convey trust. You could look at a bright blue, and that bright blue may have a little more energy to it, and it could denote innovation. And you can look at a soft blue, a light blue, and it may have a more calming effect on the body. And so we're going to take this color exercise a step further. And I'd like you to note the colors that speak to you the loudest based on the colors that we saw. And then there's also another color palette that I'm about to introduce you to. So if you have a piece of paper in front of you, that's great. If you don't have one yet, maybe just grab something, find something just to, track what it is that has impact to you, to maybe help you start figuring out more of what your color palette is. And if you already have an established color palette, great. Maybe this exercise will help you learn how to use your color more effectively. Or maybe this might help shift some of your colors. Maybe some of your colors you really like, and maybe there's a couple of colors you're like, not really happy with it. I just wanted to get something out there. And now you can take the time to fine tune those colors a little bit more. And when you're looking at color and you're looking at design, it's good to know that there's a 60, there's a 60, 30, 10 rule. And that basically refers to 60% of a color being dominant, 30% of a color that is a complement to that dominant color, and 10% is an accent. And this is not a hard and fast rule. It's just an equation to work with. Just gives your brain something to consider as you're putting color together and as you're looking at color in your layout and how are those colors working together. That there is a dominant color, that there is a complementary color, and that there are accent colors. You know, and accent colors may look like buttons and calls to action, those things that just pop, enough of a pop that creates the color palette, but it may not be the main color that you're seeing. And so an example, I'm looking at my palette right now. It's taken me a while to start crafting my palette because I really love so many colors. So it was really hard for me to choose which colors I wanted to use in my brand. But I'm applying this, and this is an example of where I am right now with it, because I believe that branding is an evolutionary process. It's not about hard and fast rules. You definitely want to make decisions along the way, and you want those decisions to build on themselves so that you're evolving in a particular direction so that you're bringing your audience with you. Right? You're not just going from one color palette and then completely changing to another color palette. That somehow in what you're choosing, you're kind of refining and evolving as you go. Or some of you out there may be like, yep, these are my colors, I'm sticking to it. And that's great. Then that is a part of how you do you. But just to show you, from choosing these colors, you could see that there's like a softer medium tone of this kind of, bluish purple. And then there's a complementary orange color. And then there's a brighter pop of the brighter purple. And for me, I chose these colors because the type of work that I do, I feel is very imaginative and wanting to stimulate not just people's creativity, but their higher minds. Their higher minds. And it's why I've chosen purple. And in terms of the orange, that I want people to have a certain sense of confidence in who they are and how they do it, to feel a sense of creativity and encouragement with who they are and what they do. And so with these colors, you could see from now I've switched the colors to the orange being more dominant and the lavender being the complementary and the brighter purple being 10%. So I don't know if you caught that, but just swapping that. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's a little bit of an exercise to show you that once you have your colors, you can use them in different ways because you're creating your own vocabulary. And the way you use your colors will be unique and different to you because you may want to use them in different ways. Here I've softened the colors a little bit and I've lightened that dominant color. And I've also lightened and I've muted that complementary color just to even soften it or ground it a little bit more. And I've also deepened the accent color. So you can see going from here to here that there's a difference because you have a range. You have a range to what you use and how you use it. And it gives you a little more freedom because sometimes when you pick a color palette, you may feel like, oh, there's not really a lot I can do. I want to do this in this color and I want to do that in that color. And if you stay with your color palette and really think about how can you maximize how you're using your color palette, you not only will be doing your brand a service, but you'll also be doing your audience a service because you'll help them with remembering who you are and connecting with what you stand for. And helping them remember is really key. And here it is on a black background. because how you use your colors and whether it's on a gray background, a white background, a color background, you can use the same color palette and somehow it could feel different depending on how you use it. And you could stay consistent and also vary it up a bit. And so if you have your piece of paper in front of you, take note. Which colors call to you? Which colors reflect your brand? And if you were to give it a 60, 30, 10% ratio, what would be the dominant color? What would be the accent color? What would be the complementary color to the dominant color and the accent color? And Manmeet or Liz, I just wanted to pause here for a moment and see if we just covered a lot of area and wondering if there were any questions that came in.
I will just check for you. No, it's still not any questions.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. And for those of you that will be watching this as a video, of course, you could pause, right? You could pause, you can go back to go through these steps anytime, just to help you sink in to what your choices are for you. And so in creating a color palette, there are a couple of great references that I use with my clients. And, you know, they're just wonderful ways to help you identify what your color palette is. So mycolor.space is really great. Coolers.co is really great. And in figuring out what you like and why, it's good to look at a lot of different color palettes. It's good to do your homework. And your homework is just about seeing, feeling, sensing what you like, what empowers you, what feels like is in alignment with your brand and what you want to share and why. Maybe look at other people's color palettes. What do you like about their color palette? What was some of the thinking that went into what they chose and why, right? You're kind of like expanding your own thought process when you ask yourself these questions. And it'll help you. Asking yourself these questions will help you come up with an even stronger color palette inside of yourself, right? You'll know what you're choosing, why you're choosing it, and maybe feel a little more confident about your choices.
We have one question, Renee.
Oh, yes.
Did it on the chat, and she's asking, will a muted tone still convey the same message as the original?
Yes. Yes, because when you look at, let's say, color and meaning, the color and meaning, it's really about the pure tone that the meaning has, which means that if you have a lighter version of that color will still carry that meaning behind it. Or if you have a muted version of that color, it'll still have that meaning behind it. You know, someone who, you know, creates online courses for people that are in business, you know, may want something brighter, you know, may want something that pops a little bit more. Someone who does like restorative yoga or has a website devoted to meditation, you know, may want muted, lighter, spacious colors, but the quality of the color, whether they're using a blue or whether they're using an orange, regardless of darkness, lightness, mutability, or brightness, it'll still have a meaning inside of our subconscious minds. I hope that answered their question?
Yes, it did.
Okay, thank you. So if there are other questions, please, now would be the time to ask.
Sure, I'll just look at the group once again and let you know. Just give me a minute.
Thank you.
I think the questions will keep coming in, and till that time, I would definitely want to ask that how many colors do you actually recommend in a palette or for branding? Like, is there a number?
That's a really good question. Less is more. Less is more. You know, when you look at a color palette, I would say that I think up to 6, and possibly narrowing it down to what your top 3 are. And I would say up to 6 because you may want accent colors, right? You may want more than one accent color. But, you know, because, you know, I pretty much grew up, you know, designing and being in advertising. And, you know, when you create a narrower path for someone to walk, it's more helpful to keep your brand more consistent. And, you know, when it's like, oh, I can grab this color and I can grab this color and I can grab, it's like, that's all really great. And it's playful and you want to experiment, you know, so depending on where you are on your path, it may be that you need to experiment with different colors until you really start to go, you know what, I thought I really liked using green, but the more I develop my work, the more I develop my courses, maybe green is not as favorable as maybe blue is, right? And so there may be something you want to shift towards, but keeping it to, let's say, 3 to 5 is probably a healthy choice. And maybe a top 3 or a top 2, because again, it's recognizability. And if you think of your brand on a website, you've got a lot of room to play. But for some people with social media, you may want your brand to read in a small little, you know, postage stamp, right? And you want that postage stamp to somehow connect to your website, connect to the email that you just sent, connect to that list builder, right? So you don't have as much room. So when you narrow it down to those main simple colors and know that those colors can also have other accents, that's great. But it's like keeping it to the seed of those maybe 3. Maybe 3 would be the best answer here.
And I have a following up question. I would want to know that how does one, you share a lot in depth about choosing the colors, understanding that what color means what, and how does one color represent a brand. But how does one come down to a conclusion of a color? Today in the morning session, we had a speaker, Sanjoli, and she was talking about how sometimes a color also represents the kind of niche that you are in. If you are someone, a plant-based business, maybe a green would go. If you are someone who deals with anxiety, somehow she said red would go. So does one choose, how does one go about selecting a color for the brand?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. It's for me, and in my view, it's both, right? Because if you have let's say a health food business, or if you're a wellness coach, you may want green to be a part of your palette because, you know, green will denote a certain sense of health, you know, and you know, and all of those things that we know green stands for, you know, freshness, and all of that. But you also want something that makes you feel empowered too, right? So the way that I like to look at color is like, some people may just make a business decision and be like, you know what, most of the brands out there that are in the wellness arena or in the health food arena, they're going to choose this palette. So I'm going to do that too. And that's a fine choice. You're putting yourself in the category. right? So people will know right away, this is who you are. But there may be some color that if you're a coach, a life coach, if you're a coach that deals with maybe topics that are not so specific, right? That there's a broad range of color. If you're, someone who deals with helping people with anxiety, you may want to go for like a more neutral, beige and, pastel and maybe teal, like, colors that will help someone feel really calm. But there's not one color that could do that. Right. So because of your work, right. And the kind of message that you have to convey to others. And that's why also knowing who you are and what your vibe is, your style is, and are those colors connecting to who you are? For a little while, like I lived in, New York City, and I wore a lot of black, and, I worked in advertising. So everything was like black and dark and heavy. And I love the color black. I'll still wear black a lot. But I realized as I started to put myself out there more, I'm like, wait a minute, am I really a dark, powerful, mysterious person? No, I'm actually not. Like when someone talks to me, my personality is different than maybe someone else's personality. And I kind of want my personality, someone to kind of get a little bit of an association or a feel for my personality with my colors too. So yeah, different things to consider, and not really one answer for everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that in depth. I also would love to know, how did you go about choosing your own brand colors? How was the process of narrowing down to whatever number of colors you've chosen for yourself?
Oh my God.
If that can be summed up in the next 15 minutes.
Yeah, it can. It can. And I have to say, it was really, really, really hard for me, because at first, I wanted to work with the color spectrum because I help people with their brands, right? And I help people with their personal brands. And that's a lot of color. And I was using black and white with a spectrum of color. And then I started to kind of identify with, well, I really need to narrow something down myself, because I want to create something that someone can recognize right away. And I started to watch color everywhere. Like I became so much more aware of color in my life. And I was like, what into and why? And because I'm, I've been a creative, working in the creative industry for so long, I like so many colors for different reasons. So it was really hard for me to choose. And I started to feel, right? Like it became more of an intuitive feeling. And then that intuitive feeling became like, okay, so what can I commit to? And so I just started to look at a lot of different colors, and what colors I kept going back to, and what colors I kept seeing more often. And it took about 2 weeks of really like opening up that mind, my eyes and my mind's eye, to really kind of source and sense and feel, okay, this feels really good right now. This is what I'm going to go with.
I really love that approach of observing and then accepting. So I love that approach, rather than sitting down one day in the front of the, in front of the laptop and, okay, what's my color? What's my color? And it's more about observation and looking at where your energy is flowing, where your attention is going. So I absolutely love that approach.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, when I started to design my new Zenler site, and I had no idea what colors to choose at that point. And because everything was black and white with multicolors, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Everything is turning black and white except for some spots of color. And I was like, I need more color throughout. And that's what made me want to feel into what colors was I really drawn to, and how did those colors make me feel about me? right? So that I could have more confidence in what I'm sharing, because that was also a big component, right, behind like creating my own teaching platform. It's like, okay, it's new, it's a new arena. What's going to help me have more confidence in me as I put my message out there into the world?
Thank you so much for sharing so much in depth. It's absolutely insightful.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, I just thank you for being a part of this presentation. Really, really my pleasure. And the things that just to leave people with is play with it, experiment with it, feel it, notice where you feel it and why, and then be it, like become it, become the colors that you're stepping into.
So beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.